So Alec Baldwin's attorneys file a motion asking that the special prosecutor be removed from the case. Let's talk about it. My name is Jamahl Kersey. I'm the principal attorney at Kersey Law, a boutique criminal defense firm in San Diego, California. And in this video, we're talking about Alec Baldwin's attorneys recently filing a motion to have the special prosecutor removed from the case. So State Representative out of New Mexico, Andrea Reeb, has been specially appointed as the prosecutor in this case. And what Baldwin's attorneys are arguing is that this is a violation of the Constitution because you can't be both a legislator, so you can't be both a lawmaker and an executive. So prosecution falls under the executive branch, and they're saying that, hey, you can't be both under the legislative and the executive, and so this is wrong. We need to have her off the case. You know, on its face, I haven't done the research in this case, but it sounds like that's a legitimate and valid argument, and we'll see what happens. I would anticipate that that Ms. Reeb would be removed from the case, but you know, realistically, I mean, prosecutors, and I don't want to make light of this argument, right? If there's being a constitutional violation, then you know they need to make that situation right. But at the end of the day, prosecutors are pretty interchangeable. They're gonna get her off and, you know, put another prosecutor on the case, and Baldwin's still gonna be facing these charges. So it's not like, all right, you know, now the prosecutor's off this case and the whole case goes away. No, he's still facing these involuntary manslaughter charges, and he's got to defend himself against these charges. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the facts of this case and a couple thoughts that I have in terms of what has happened so far. And so, you know, first things first, rest in peace to Halyna Hutchins. This is obviously a sad and tragic story. There are obviously professions that you can go into where you know there's a possibility that you may not come home. You know, if you're a cop, if you're a firefighter, if you're a military member at war, you know that you might not come home. But as a cinematographer, that's not one of those jobs, right? Ms. Hutchins didn't go onto that Rust set and say, hey, you know, this might be my last day on earth. But unfortunately, on October 21st, 2021, she did in fact pass away. And unfortunately, as a result of her being shot by Alec Baldwin. Very early on, Alec Baldwin took to the cameras to say his piece, giving an interview on national television. And I just have the biggest problem with doing this. I always say, and if there's anything you can take away from this video, if you are charged with a crime or under investigation, please be quiet. Do not say anything to anyone except your attorney. That is very important. Don't talk to the police. Don't give any sort of statement. And certainly don't go on national television trying to say your piece. And listen, I get it. I understand it is a natural thought to want to be able to say your piece, to be able to clear your name. But really, I mean, you can definitely be doing more harm than good. There's a reason why it is a constitutional right. It is a constitutional right to remain silent because, you know, when you're under investigation, when you're charged with a crime, really anything that you say can ultimately be incriminating, even if you think it's just innocent and don't think that it would be. One of the main things that Baldwin said was that, hey, I did not shoot this gun. He was very adamant that he didn't pull the trigger. And even his lawyers came out and said, hey, there was some sort of malfunction with this gun. It was faulty in some way. But, you know, I just don't like people making statements like this. And, you know, and again, with all due respect to Ms. Hutchins, who lost her life and she's, you know, never coming back. The issue that I see with Baldwin making this statement is now he is locked in, right? He's locked into having said, I did not pull this trigger. And what has happened since him making that statement, the FBI did an investigation, right? And we talked about that in a previous video. The FBI conducted an investigation and they ultimately reached the conclusion that Baldwin had to have pulled the trigger, right? So that there was no other way that this gun could have been fired without him pulling the trigger, right? So that leaves us, at least as it stands right now, one of those things has to be true. Either Baldwin did not pull the trigger and there was some sort of misfire or malfunction of the gun, or the FBI is correct in saying that there's no possible way that this gun could have been fired without him pulling the trigger. You certainly can't rule out the possibility that the FBI could have been wrong, right? But in order to reach that conclusion, I'm calling all the firearms experts that I can, and getting them on the phone, especially if there's somebody who's going to be an expert in the particular type of pistol that was involved, and being able to say, hey, is there any other possible way that this gun might be able to fire without someone pulling the trigger, right? Because if we have an expert reach a different conclusion, because certainly, even the best and brightest minds can differ in opinion as it relates to, the topics of which they're experts. And if we have an expert who can say, hey, listen, this is the other way that this possibly could have fired without him pulling the trigger, then that's going to be very useful. Because otherwise you have this FBI report, and obviously the prosecutors are going to side with the FBI on this, and they're saying that it can't have gone off without him pulling the trigger. So then it makes him look like a liar. And this leads to another discussion in terms of interaction with the client and the defense attorney. I always tell people, you have to keep it real with me. You can lie to everybody else, don't lie to me. Reason being, if I'm making representations to the prosecutor about something that you told me, right? That information has to have come from you, the client, right? Unless it's something that came from my investigation or my review of the facts, my review of the reports, the evidence. Basically everything's going to have come from you as the client. So if I make a representation to the prosecutor, hey, my client didn't do this, this is actually what happened, and then it turns out that that's not true, right? You lied and that wasn't true, then, maybe I suffer a temporary embarrassment, right? Because what I said to the prosecutor blew up in my face. But really, the one who's really going to be hammered as a result is you. You're the one who's going to suffer as a result. I imagine that if Baldwin took to the TV cameras and said, I didn't pull this trigger, then he probably is going to have said the same thing to his lawyers. So it's the same situation. If Baldwin's lawyers are making the representation based on what their client told him that he never pulled this trigger and he really did, right? If they can't find any other alternative explanation for how this gun went off, then Baldwin's going to be the one who suffers as a result, because make no mistakes about it. If you lie, right? If you do something and then you lie on it versus taking responsibility for your actions, you lie to cover up what you did. Prosecutors don't like that very much. And so any chance that you had for possibly negotiating a better deal, reducing a felony to a misdemeanor or a misdemeanor to an infraction, or lowering the amount of time that a person's facing, a lot of that's going to go out of the window, because the prosecutor is basically going to be offended that not only did your client do what they're alleged to have done, but then they lied to try and cover it up. It's just not a good look. So that's another reason why you don't want your client, taking to news cameras or making statements, talking to other people that end up getting recorded and making admissions that can ultimately be used against the client. One of the difficult things that I see with this case, obviously, Baldwin doesn't have or did not have any intent to kill, right? So there's no allegation that he purposely shot Halyna Hutchins, leading to her death. But he's being charged with involuntary manslaughter, not murder, right? So if there was anything to suggest that he did have intent to kill, then he'd be charged with murder. But still, nobody wants to have an involuntary manslaughter charge on their record. But this makes a sad and tragic situation worse by, you already know that unfortunately you killed one of your coworkers, and on top of that, you're then being criminally charged. And so we know that on some level, Alec Baldwin's actions caused the death of Halyna Hutchins, right? She was shot from a bullet from a gun that was in his hand, but without having the intent to kill, that has, it may not sit right with you that he's getting charged criminally. And so under New Mexican criminal law, involuntary manslaughter can occur if a person is engaging in an otherwise lawful act. So obviously it is lawful to be in possession of a firearm on a movie set, But if you unintentionally kill someone by being negligent or not exercising due care, then that's where you can be charged with involuntary manslaughter, and that's what we have here. And we already saw an interview from a New Mexican prosecutor noting a lot of the violations on the set of Rust that ultimately contributed to what happened. But really, the major problem that I have with this, and in defense of Alec Baldwin, is how did a live round make it into that gun, right? So we had Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who was in charge of the firearms on the set, but then apparently the ammunition supplier somehow included live rounds into this box of ammunition that was for this movie set. And that just seems completely absurd. Like, how did this happen? This is a box of rounds that is supposed to be for a movie set. How do you make the mistake of slipping live rounds into a box of dummy rounds for a movie set? This is just insane. And so from Alec Baldwin's perspective, he was informed that it was a cold gun, right? So he had no reason whatsoever to believe that there would be a live round in a gun. And that makes sense because there was no reason to have live rounds on this movie set. So I like to use exaggerated examples to illustrate points, and that would be this. If someone tells me, and they are a professional, and they tell me, hey, these are prop rounds, right? It's a cold gun. I should be able to take that gun, put it to the side of my head, pull the trigger 100 times, and never feel like I'm in danger of blowing my brains out. Now, obviously nobody would ever do that, but that's the point. There's no reason why a live round should have made it into that gun. And so we have the other issue in terms of Baldwin having the gun pointed towards Miss Hutchins. I was doing some research just on the internet, looking at safety standards for guns on movie sets. And, it seemed to be some conflicting information, but there were enough people saying that you don't point a gun at another person on a movie set. And I was saying, well, then how do we see these scenes where people get shot, and what happens is apparently they shoot at an angle, right? So the gun is never actually pointed at the person directly. It's pointed at an angle, and based on the camera angles, they're able to make it look as though the gun is being pointed at the person, but it's really not. I didn't see an explanation for, the shots from, at point blank range, right? So I want to say that I've seen people get shot where the gun is, very close to the person at point blank range. I don't know how they pull that off, but nonetheless, if that is a standard, because when you're looking at a negligence standard, it's based on, a reasonable, prudent person in the same industry, in the same field, in the same situation. So in that situation, if the standard is that you never point a gun directly at a person, then you might find that Baldwin was negligent in that he had the gun pointed at Hutchins, obviously. But again, his position as it stands right now is that he didn't pull the trigger. And even if he did, he had no reason to believe that there would be a live round in that gun. And that to me is the stronger argument and stronger position. It's not lying and saying that you didn't pull the trigger if you did. And again, I don't know if he did or not, but he's saying that he didn't. But if he did, the stronger argument is that, listen, there never should have been a live round in that gun. And obviously it is a total tragedy that this accident occurred, but he should not be held responsible when there were professionals on that set whose job it was to make sure that live rounds didn't find their way onto a movie set, and that happened. And obviously it's a tragedy, but Mr. Baldwin should not be held criminally liable for this situation. And that would ultimately be the argument. We'll see how this thing plays out. But again, this does illustrate the point of why you should not be making statements. You should remain silent, allow your lawyers to do the talking for you, and you're just going to fare better as a case plays out. So If you got something out of this, please show me some love and hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you never miss a new video when it drops. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace.